Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to be adding a gradient to a layer, which specifically will be on the Hawaii layer. So make sure you select Hawaii to make it active. And the book wants us to select the words, which if you remember chapter 3, which involved a lot of different ways of selecting by using the magic wand or the object select or quick select tool, there's other ways to select things. So if you, and this I kind of just learned, I don't use this method often, but I probably should. So if you right click on the Hawaii layer, you're gonna get these different options. I also learned that if you right click on the actual layer here, you get different options than if you right click on the thumbnail. So this little box right here, if you right click on top of that, you get something different, which I did not know this because I don't really use this that often. So you can change the size of your thumbnails here, which is pretty cool. And then if you notice, you have select pixels. So this is another way to select things. So click on that. And there you go. It saves you the time of going the other route and selecting each individual letter. So right click on the actual thumbnail and you'll see select pixels. It's pretty cool. Learning something new every day. So once you have it selected, we are going to go to the tools panel, which is here, and we're going to look for our gradient tool. Your gradient tool sometimes is where the paint bucket is at. If you right click on that, your gradient tool is in the same spot. It's just sometimes it'll be set to gradient, sometimes it'll be on paint bucket. We want the gradient tool, and that'll give us our options for gradient. So we're gonna click on the foreground color in the swatch tools panel, which is right here. And we're gonna select a bright shade of orange. So orange, bright shade of orange. It's more of like a yellow orange, but that's what it looks like on the book. And by doing that, it changes our gradient up here as well. Make sure that the linear gradient is selected, which is this first one. Notice there's other options as well. If you ever want to play around with those, you can. But for this, we're doing a linear. And then in the options bar, click the arrow next to the gradient editor, which is this right here. This is our gradient editor. And that lets us open this little box. And it says select the foreground to background swatch. In the first basics group. Okay, so open up the basics group and it says foreground to background. So we're gonna select that and then click anywhere outside of our gradient to close it. So click out here. Whoops, Command Z. Okay, that accidentally filled that. I didn't mean to. And then while we have our Hawaii still selected, we're going to click our mouse. So we're on gradient. You see this little crosshair? That means we're ready to set our gradient. So I'm going to start at the bottom, click and drag a line like this, and let go. And there's our gradient. You can click and redo it, and it kind of adjusts. So if I start down here, and whoops, there, it kind of expands the gradient even more. It just depends. If I go this way, you'll notice the gradient pretty much starts wherever my click is at. So we want it from the bottom to top, like that. And we're gonna deselect these the selection, so Command D to make it go away, or you can go to select, deselect. Same thing. I just like to use shortcuts more. we've made a few changes, so Command S to save. And now we're going to apply a layer style. So we're going to select the Island Paradise layer, which is this one. That's our text layer that we added in the previous video. And then we're going to add a drop shadow. So remember, there's two ways to do this. You can go to layer style, or go to the effects button, which I prefer, and do drop shadow. And another thing I want to show you is there's all these different effects right here. I selected drop shadow, so that's why this is check marked, but I can uncheck it and I can do a different one, or I can do more than one. So just because you select a specific effect doesn't mean that you have to stick with it if you would find another one that you prefer. For this, we are going to stick to drop shadow because we're trying to follow the assignment. So drop shadow selected. Make sure it's highlighted, because if you highlight a different one, it gives you options for that. So we have specific settings we need to follow. So the blend mode needs to be at multiply, so it's already there. The opacity is going to be at 75, so type in 75. The angle, which is pretty cool that you can mess around with the angle of the shadow, needs to be at 78 degrees, so type in 78. The distance will be at 5. The spread is 30. This, just to kind of show you before we finalize these numbers, the distance is how far, and you can kind of see down here, how far do you want the shadow to be, and how spread out do you want it to be, and also the size of the shadow. So that's what that is. So this was 5 pixels, the spread was 30, and the size was 10 pixels. So those are the specific settings that Book wants us to do, and we're going to click OK. And we just added a drop shadow effect to our Island Paradise. So again, Command S to save. So we also want to do that same drop shadow to our Hawaii layer, because it kind of looks weird that this has a shadow but that doesn't. So instead of redoing the effects, let me switch to this. Instead of doing the effects that we just did for the Island Paradise to the Hawaii, we can actually just copy that effect. So if you notice, there's a little effects button, right, or not button, but a little label here, and we can copy that and drag it to another layer to apply the same exact effects, which is really cool. So on your keyboard, you're going to hold down Command, and then this effects little icon right here, you're going to click and drag it to the Hawaii layer. Whoops, Command Z. I always do this. I always get this. It's not Command. I'm so used to Command on the keyboard. So I undid it. It's actually Option. So my bad on that. Option, hold down Option, click and drag. There you go. That was the correct one. That lets you copy the effect. So let me undo Command Z. So we learned now that if you hold Command, you can actually move the effect if you apply it to the wrong thing. But if you want to copy the effect, you hold down Option, which is next to Command on the left of Command. So Option, hold it down, click and drag to Hawaii, and there you go. Now you got the same effect on both, and you didn't have to go and retype everything you just did. So we're going to select the Hawaii layer, and we're going to click the Add a Layer Style button right here, the effect, or FX at the bottom. We're going to click on that, and we're also going to add a stroke to this. So click on Stroke, And in the settings, we're going to do the size is going to be 4 pixels. The position we're going to change to outside. Blend mode is going to be normal. Opacity will stay at 100. The color though, we're going to switch it to green. Preferably a green that goes well with the green that we use for the island paradise. Now if you want, if you move your mouse outside of the color picker, it turns into the eyedropper, so you can copy the green from your paradise. That way it matches perfectly and you don't have to worry about trying to figure out what kind of green. So just copy the green, click OK, and then click OK right here. And now we applied an additional effect. So now you'll see here you have a drop shadow as well as a stroke effect. We can turn it off and on so you can see the difference. And it's the exact same green, that way it matches. It's nice and cohesive. So we're gonna Command